Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello. This is the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, you know who it is, Kayvon. Hope everyone's having a lovely day, and I'm pumped up. I am pumped up. I hope you can hear me banging on the table there. You know why? I've got my Carolina Hurricanes jersey on. The playoffs are back. We are coming at you from the studios of Raleigh, North Carolina. Big thank you to everyone in the Golden State Media Concepts studios back in California. This show would not be itself without all the hard work that you guys do, so thank you. And then most importantly, a big thanks to all you listeners, because this show would be really nothing without you great listeners who have been truly amazing throughout this show. This is a big milestone, guys. Episode number 10. The big number 10, dropping today, will come out Sunday morning. So that's awesome stuff. Really pumped up about that. We've made it through 10 shows. Some might say that's a miracle. Let's see if we can get to 20. Let's see if we can get to 50. Let's see if we can get to the hundo. But yeah, like I was saying, I'm so pumped up, guys. I mean, I'm in my Carolina Hurricanes jersey. They're facing off against the New York Rangers. The New York Rangers. Best of 5, so usually we all, those that follow hockey, it's a 7-game series. It's just like NBA. They do it the exact same way. But with, they had to truncate the truncated playoffs and everything because of the coronavirus. They did best of 5 for the first round. So it makes game 1 even more crucial because, if you lose game 1, you immediately become in a huge hole. Like you cannot go down 2-0 or it's done. It's pretty much over. So that's going to be really fun. I'm going to go and watch the game with some of my friends. Of course, I'm going to be smart while I do it. I am not trying to be your mom, your dad, your grandpa, grandma, whatever. But if you go out during times like this, you got to be smart. It's just that plain and that simple. And I'm going to go out, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to live my life, but I'm going to do it in a smart way. I'm going to wear a mask. I'm going to social distance. It has nothing to do with politics. I don't care who you are, what you follow, what you like. This is strictly a health and safety issue, and you have every right to go hang out with your friends just like I do. Just be smart while you do it, because if we are smart, then we keep getting exciting shows like this, because that means sports keep on going, And we don't want to fall back into where we were a couple months ago, where we had nothing to talk about and no sports. So we've got an awesome show today for you guys. I'm really pumped up. A lot of great topics. So let's break it down like we always do. For the first quarter, all right, opening quarter, catching the kickoff, trying to run it back all the way as we do sometimes. Have you guys heard this recent Aaron Rodgers interview that he did with Kyle Brandt, who works at NFL Network? This is juicy. This is juicy stuff. These type of interviews are like crack for me. I mean, I'm not even kidding. I just can't get enough of the content. I love stuff like that. You get so many storylines out of it, and we're gonna start with that. We're gonna dive into that. Then to end the quarter, We're going to talk some Antonio Brown and the suspension the NFL gave him. We're going to look at that suspension and see what that means moving forward. And I have a prediction about that I think you guys are going to want to listen. And then taking us into the second quarter, we're going to talk about the recent college football news. It looks like we're going to have a season. At least we're going to attempt to have one. And the ACC made a power move recently, which made other conferences have to follow suit. What does that mean exactly? We're going to break it all down in the second quarter. That will then give us a pretty comfortable lead, I would assume, going into halftime, where we'll then come out and we'll keep the Kayvon's Grand Division Tour going, baby. We'll keep the tour going. We'll head to the good old AFC South, and we'll give you all of our predictions like we always do. Let you have some time to lock those babies in, run them to the bank. And then we'll head into the fourth and final quarter where we're going to ramp things up as we always do. It's clutch time. And if you guys remember, a while ago we did teams that will be NFL teams that would be most affected by the COVID-19 offseason. Because there is no offseason. Well, now we're going to flip it around and do NFL teams that actually will have the most to gain, that will be the most equipped to handle an offseason like this. And we'll be ready to go week one. We're going to lay out those teams. A couple of those teams just might be yours, and we're going to explain why those teams have the best chance of success right off the bat when you have a really odd offseason like we had this year. So let's get right into it. And before we talk Aaron Rodgers, I want to quickly say this because I think all sports fans feel this type of way. And I think all sports fans were extremely delighted to see the NBA back. And the NBA deserves a shout out. They deserve an applause. They really do. The NBA showed us the power of leadership, the power of accountability. They showed us what it is like when your players trust your commissioner. There is still a long way to go, and I get that, but the NBA restart has gone as good as it possibly could have so far. 2 straight weeks without a positive COVID test. Players were still going in and out. One player going to Magic City Strip Club to get some good old wings. Other players had to leave for family emergencies, and there still was no virus that was able to come through that bubble and leak in, and it really is remarkable. It really is. During a time like this where we see every week now it feels like baseball's having a new test. Baseball came out and said a positive test for COVID, and baseball came out, the commissioner recently, and said we might have to cancel the season if we don't do a better job limiting the positive test that we get back for COVID-19 on our players. And he's right. So with all of that, and now the NFL is trying to figure it out, and we have to give the NFL the benefit of the doubt because we haven't seen how it goes yet. But NBA, and we'll see how things go with NHL here, but all around, the NBA just did a phenomenal job. It's a miracle. It really is nothing short of a miracle. The NBA players, the owners, the front office, league, they all deserve a massive round of applause. The way they made it feel like a real game, the way the players those first 2 games, the Jazz and the Pelicans and the Lakers and the Clippers, it felt like it was a playoff game. It was intense. It felt like it was in a stadium. There was nothing different to it, and that just shows the amount of trust that these players have with their commissioner, that the commissioner has in the players, and it shows what happens when you work together as a team. When you put a bunch of smart heads, knowledgeable heads together, you can really come up with some great things. So I just wanted to say that first as a sports fan. But now let's get into the Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers recently sat down for a long interview with Kyle Brandt, who, again, I love Kyle Brandt. He does an awesome job. I don't know if you guys watch Good Morning Football. It is a show that plays on NFL Network every Monday through Friday. I think it's like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's one of my favorite shows. It is an awesome show. They do such a good job on it. And Kyle Brandt, who's on that show, recently started his own podcast. And the podcast doesn't officially debut until next month. But for his first interview, he had Aaron Rodgers. And they were drinking some whiskey, and Aaron Rodgers got real. And I know that even though the podcast doesn't drop till next month, they let out a little snippet of it. So I want you guys to hear this little snippet of Aaron Rodgers talking, and then we're going to dive into it.
Just look at the facts. You know, they traded up, they drafted him. I would say they like him, they want to play him. Now I think quarterbacks are playing earlier. It gives, gives some latitude for young coaches and GMs to play their guys. And I get it. I really do. I don't harbor any ill will about it. Like, was I bummed out? Of course. It wouldn't be. Mm-hmm. I wanted to play my entire career in Green Bay. I love the city. I grew up there. Really, I was 21. I'm 36 now. A lot changes during that time.
That was Aaron Rodgers. And that was, wasn't that so cool to hear? I mean, to hear Rodgers open up like that. When do you see a professional athlete open up and talk like that? Especially while they're still on the team that they're talking about. Look, I don't think it's unfair for me to say this. I don't think it's unfair at all, but Aaron Rodgers is someone that can come off a bit standoffish, right? He shows an attitude, not necessarily the greatest leader. I think everyone would agree that at some point they've seen that in Rodgers. I'm not saying always he does that, but at some point you have seen it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just who he is. Well, what Rodgers did throughout this recent interview showed so much growth and maturity. It honestly sounded like a man that is at peace. It sounds like a man that is at peace and he understands the situation. He understands the business. He just gets it, man. And I think he's fine with it. And to me, there's a sense of purity in that. There's something in that I like, okay? And Rodgers ended up going on and saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, Rodgers was talking about draft night this past April, and he said essentially he was watching the draft, and he fully expected them to take a wide receiver in the first round. I mean, he even started to name wide receivers to Kyle Brandt. He was saying, he mentioned guys like T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk. He was excited. You could tell he genuinely knew about these receivers. He did his homework. He felt like the organization was going to bring him in a receiver, so he wanted to know more about the receivers. And he did his homework on them. You could tell by the way he was talking about them. Well, as we all know, the Packers didn't draft a receiver. Instead, they drafted a quarterback, and they didn't just draft a quarterback. They actually traded up a couple of picks and then took the quarterback. And they didn't take any of the wide receivers that Rodgers was naming. Well, Rodgers then went on to say in the podcast that after he saw this happen, he went and poured a big glass of tequila so he could get ready for the onslaught of text messages and phone calls that he knew was about to come his way that night. Asking, is he okay? Whatever, all that stuff. And Rodgers has faced the facts since then that he's not going to be a Packer much longer. And he's okay with that. And he is right. I honestly think he has 2 years left in that Packers organization, and then he is gone. And the Packers knew that. And Rodgers clearly knew that from the moment they traded up to get Jordan Love. I mean, that has to upset Rodgers. It has to upset him. He didn't show any anger. He didn't show any animosity in that clip. He was calm. He was very calm. But I believe he is upset, and rightfully so. I think he looks at it like this. We had a chance to get to the Super Bowl. We had a chance to build on our success, and instead you dumped me. You know what it's like? It's kind of like this scenario. This is like if I have a Porsche, all right? I have a Porsche as my car, and it's a nice Porsche, baby. I mean, yeah, it's getting a little up there on miles, but, man, it still drives good. It looks good. It's still got all of its strengths. It still is one of the nicest cars on the road, But then I hear about this brand new car that is coming out. And it's like this brand new, completely new dealership, new model, new everything. And I've heard it's cool, I've heard it's got a lot of cool features. I heard they haven't done much testing on it yet, though. But we know it looks good. And it can go fast. But the question is, can it really hold up once it gets on the highway? See, these are all the questions about it, but I still say, screw it. I'm going to get that car. I'm going to dump my real nice Porsche, my baby Porsche, and I'm going to go take a chance with this new car because it's the shiny new thing. That is exactly what the Packers did here. Yeah, Rodgers is getting older. Yeah, he's not what he was 5 years ago, but he still proved that he can take you all the way to the game before the Super Bowl this past year. Not only that, but he can take you there in the first year with a new coach in a new system with very little help. Look, I'm not sitting here telling you the Packers shouldn't have drafted a QB. It's always good to have a QB and learn and model their game after your starter. The Patriots draft a QB every single year. But when do they draft a QB? Only one time when Brady was there did they draft a QB in the second round, and that was Jimmy Garoppolo. They never drafted one in the first. But you do that, you draft that QB in the third or the fourth round. Shoot, I wouldn't even care if you did it in the second round. After you drafted a legitimate piece that helps you win now. The Packers have squandered Aaron Rodgers' greatness. The Packers have failed Aaron Rodgers. The Green Bay Packers have one of the greatest QBs out there in Brett Favre for 16 years, only one Super Bowl to show for it. Then they have Aaron Rodgers, also a top QB in the NFL when it comes to pure talent. They have him for almost 16 years. Only one Super Bowl to show for it. The Packers have failed to put the right amount of pieces around Rodgers. Let me explain. While Aaron Rodgers has been the starting QB for the Packers have had three times throughout those years that he's been there, top 10 defenses. Okay, so let me say that better. While Aaron Rodgers has been the starting QB for the Packers have had a top 10 defense, so ranked in the top 10 by the end of the season 3 times. 3 times. Once in 2009, once in 2010, and then this past year. What happened in 2010? Do you guys remember? That's right, they won the Super Bowl. What happened this year? Yep, you got it. They got to the NFC Championship game. So when you give Aaron Rodgers talent, when you give Aaron Rodgers a defense, when you give Aaron Rodgers help, he takes you far, baby. The Packers have squandered Aaron Rodgers' career. And this is something that I have heard people say, and it's so completely false. I actually said this on my very first show with GSMC. Very first show. This is not the Favre-Rodgers dynamic at all. And Rodgers agreed. Rodgers said the same thing. He said, this is not the same situation as when it was when I came in under Brett Favre. Brett Favre was then trying to retire multiple times. He threatened to retire multiple times. Also, Rodgers fell in the draft that year, right into the Packers' arms. Rodgers was being picked by many to go number 1 overall in the draft, and then for some reason that night, he just kept on falling, and he fell right there for the Packers. This is nowhere near the same dynamic. At the end of the day, Jordan Love might be great. He might. For all I know, he could be a fantastic quarterback. But this has nothing to do with Jordan Love. He could be a Hall of Famer for all I care. This comes down to one thing, and that is the Packers let Aaron Rodgers down. They failed him. And now he will leave. Aaron Rodgers will be on a new team. And it makes sense. And I always say this. And I actually got a comment about this the other day on the podcast, which I really appreciate. But the person that said it said, whoever's out there that did it, I appreciate you. They said, I love how Kayvon always talks about the relationship between players, coaches, organizations, all of that. And he's right. I do. He listens. Because I always say communication and trust. 2 biggest keys to a successful organization. Once that communication runs out, once that trust runs out, you have nothing. Look at Peyton Manning when he was with the Colts. After he had to go have that neck surgery, The Colts didn't trust that Manning was going to be his great self again. So what did they move? What did they do? They moved on. Look at Brady. Brady didn't leave the Patriots because Bill Belichick was a bad coach. He didn't leave the Patriots because he didn't like Josh McDaniels anymore. He left because Belichick went behind his back and wanted to trade him and keep Jimmy Garoppolo. And he went behind his back to do it. And if it wasn't for the owner, it would have happened. Ever since that happened, their relationship changed because there was no more trust. And now here we are with Aaron Rodgers in the exact same boat. Why in the heck should Rodgers trust anything the Packers say? And honestly, if it wasn't for the salary cap taking a hit next season because of COVID, and as we've talked about many times, no fans in the stands or barely any fans in the stands, it's going to take a hit. The salary cap is going to take a hit. If anything, at the best, they'll be able to keep it stagnant, but most likely it's going to take a hit. And if it wasn't for that, then I would say Rodgers would be gone next year. But his contract's too big to make that happen, especially with the salary cap taking the hit. But I'll give it 2 years, and it's going to happen. And when it does, it is going to be a fantastic dynamic to watch. Packers fans, you better just hope that he doesn't pull a Brett Favre and go to a division rival. But wait, now that I think about it, isn't there a team in Chicago that's going to need a quarterback? Ho, 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 wouldn't that be something? I can name 2 teams off the bat that would have social media and the NFL world go crazy. 1, if you went to the Bears. 2, and I don't even want to say it, but if you went to the New England Patriots. Do you know what Bill Belichick would do with a man like Aaron Rodgers? It would be, I don't even know. I don't even want to picture it, but it would be something crazy to watch with a lot of success coming at the end of it. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. As always, we are pumped up Saturday morning here. My Carolina Hurricanes are back and playing today. Can't wait to watch that. And we appreciate all of you guys that are listening. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, it's time to dive into a little bit of the Antonio Brown news and then the big topic here of college football. ACC, my neck of the country here, made a power move that made the SEC, the big dogs, say, uh-oh, we better follow suit. We'll talk about that all in just a second. Stay tuned right after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
We are back. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. We truly appreciate that as always. You guys are fantastic. Hope everyone's having a great day wherever you are, however you're listening. We always appreciate it. We just had good talk about Aaron Rodgers. really just spoke the truth. I think many people I actually don't think many people will disagree with some of the stuff that I said, but you never know. I just personally don't think that they put enough talent around him, Rodgers. And that's all it is, when you have a quarterback talent like Rodgers, and we're kind of seeing the same thing over there in Seattle. In the beginning of the years, they did well surrounding Russell Wilson. And I get it. You then have to start paying the quarterback big money, and it takes away from how you can build around him and all that stuff. But there's ways to find loopholes around that. And if you're a really good organization with a really good structure throughout it, you know how to make those type of loopholes and everything like that. And it's just now it's come down to the truth that Rodgers has accepted that he's gone. He's out. He knew that from the moment that Green Bay traded up to draft Jordan Love in the first round, and Green Bay knew that from the moment they did it too. Let's not play any jokes here. Let's not go and say, oh, we feel so bad for Green Bay because Rodgers is going to leave them. Get out of here. Green Bay made the decision. They made their bed when the moment they did this move, and now they have to lie in it. And that's business. And I'm not hating on Green Bay. No, I'm not hating on the move. That's their decision. It's stupid. I wouldn't have done it. Not at this moment. But they have every right to get rid of Rodgers if they want to. That's the business of football. But it's a dumb decision. We're going to now dive into some college football talk. And then remember, coming up in 2 segments, because we're entering the second quarter now. Coming up to in the game to get going into the fourth quarter, we're going to talk about the teams that are most equipped to handle this type of offseason, this COVID-19 plagued offseason. Which teams are going to be ready come week 1 to start going full swing ahead? To be able to start with that 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0 start. There's only a couple organizations out there that are able to handle that. Which teams are those? Which organizations are those? We'll dive into that. We'll look at that. But first, let's dive into college football here. And I do quickly want to say something because today, or actually yesterday, Mike Golic. Anybody that loves sports talk knows who Mike Golic is. He's a former NFL player, and he has been doing morning sports talk radio for 22 years now. He started at ESPN 22 years ago. The show turned into the Mike and Mike phenomenon that it was, and that was, honestly, that was one of my favorite shows of all time. Then these last couple years, Mike Greenberg went off to do the show Get Up, and Mike Golic and Trey Wingo did it for a couple years with Mike Golic's son, Mike Golic Jr., and that was a great show as well. But on Friday ended Mike Golic's 22-year run as a morning sports talk show host. And the reason I brought this up is because it's personal to me. I grew up listening to Mike and Mike. Whether I was on the way to school, whether I was on the way to sports practice, whether I was in the car with my mom or dad, I always had them put on. And for Raleigh, it's the station's 99.9, the ESPN affiliate. I always had them put it on, and I loved it. And it's a big reason why I want to do sports talk today. It's a big reason why I have this podcast. While I got into having this podcast, because of what Mike Golic showed. And then from the other side of things, he's a pioneer. He's the first former player to really go into the sports media and have a big impact like that. So he paved the way for all these other players that you see once they retire, go into sports media and have a second career. He honestly paved the way for all of those players. And it's really cool, and he deserves a shout out, and I wanted to do that real quick. So congrats, Mike Golic, to an amazing 22-year career as an awesome sports talk host. Look forward to seeing what else is next for you now. All right, let's dive into this college football stuff now, all right? Because the good old ACC conference that is my neck of the woods here. I'm in ACC country, baby. But the ACC was the first to come out and say, hey, we are putting together our 10-game schedule within the conference and conference only. So there will be no games like ACC versus SEC or anything like that. Also, Notre Dame will be joining the ACC as well, which I think is really exciting for the ACC this year and brings another really good team in the mix. But I digress. I'll talk about that in a second. After the ACC made that announcement, we have had other conferences come out as well. So we need to sort all of this stuff out, okay? There's also one conference that still hasn't come up with any sort of plan, and we don't know what's going on there, but we're going to dive into that. So again, the ACC was the first team to come out with this conference-only +1 type schedule that is being presented as a type of power move by the ACC. It really is, and there's still a lot of consideration about the kids going to school and what happens with the non-student athletes. If those student athletes do come back on campus, what will their interaction be with the football students? Would this be putting the football students at risk and the other teams that will be coming to play that football team? So there's all these conversations that need to be had and will be had, especially now that college football season is getting so close. But from the logistics standpoint, the ACC said this. They said, we're doing this, and you other conference better follow suit. I mean, the ACC forced these conferences like the SEC to go in the same direction. And that is why this is a power move by the ACC. See, every year, there are these historic rivalries that are played between one conference team and another. For example, you have the Clemson and South Carolina game. You got the Florida versus Florida State game. You got the Georgia versus Georgia Tech game. These are all ACC versus SEC long time rivalries that will now be canceled because the ACC made this move. So John Swofford, who's the longtime ACC commissioner, declaring, this is what we're doing. We're not announcing those in-state games. It's putting pressure on those other conferences, particularly and especially the SEC. It makes them have to decide, are we going to go conference only as well? And ultimately they said yes, and they had to make that decision, which they just recently did. The ACC also got Notre Dame, as I said earlier, in their conference, and this is not likely to happen at all with any other year. This is not likely to happen. This is a one-year thing, and with the circumstances and since Notre Dame is an independent school, because remember, Notre Dame is independent for football, but for basketball and all other sports, they are in the ACC. But for football, they have such a big following, and they make so much money. They are independent, and that allows them to play a schedule against all these different types of teams from different conferences. They always play the Stanford, the USC, the Michigans, all that stuff. Well, obviously, that would have been really tough to do that this year, so the ACC said, come on and join us for this outlier year. And this is huge for the ACC because now Notre Dame will be sharing their revenue with all the other ACC schools. So ACC schools are absolutely loving this, and also it brings another really good competitive team to the mix, to the ACC conference, which is always great. So I like the move. I think the ACC did a good job here because ACC is usually known as a basketball conference, right? You have your Dukes, your Carolinas, but football has definitely held its own, especially of late, mainly because of Clemson, as we all know. So as I mentioned, the SEC is going to play a conference-only schedule. The Big Ten is going to play a conference-only schedule. The Pac-12 is going to play a conference-only schedule. All of this has now fallen into place because the ACC put that first step out there. And they're all starting at different times, by the way. Some are starting early September, like the ACC, I think, is starting September 12th. And some are pushing it back, starting in the latter part of September. The SEC, I think, is starting September 26th, which is going to cause for a very confusing and convoluting season. But I think we already knew that was going to happen no matter what. What's even more confusing is what in the heck the Big 12 is waiting for now. All right, the Big 12 only has 10 teams. So maybe that's the issue. Maybe they don't see a conference-only schedule as being fulfilling enough because you're going to have to overlap more games to get a full schedule in, as opposed to these other conferences that have 14 teams in them. So it's easy to play your side. It's easy to play your division of the conference and then sprinkle in a couple other games from your side from the other side of the schedule, where maybe they're insignificant, where it doesn't affect the ultimate standing, but you can find a way to create a full schedule. And then when you do the +1 with a rivalry game that's in-state, it just makes sense. So that's what the +1 is. They're going to play an all-conference game and add that +1 with an in-state type rivalry if possible. The Big 12 is in a difficult spot because they don't have enough teams to do that. We know they all play each other, and then the top two teams will play for the Big 12 championship, right? They don't have like a Big 12 East and a Big 12 West like the SEC does and the ACC does and all that. But it still leaves them short even if they do play all the teams together. So I'm assuming that's what they're waiting and haven't followed suit like the other conference. I'm assuming that. They're waiting for all the teams in the conference to make some deals like Iowa State did recently. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but this is really interesting, and I really like what Iowa State did here. So Big 12 school Iowa State decided to sign an independent contract with Ball State. They're called guaranteeing games pretty much. We call them buy games, essentially. But they're guaranteed. What that means is Ball State is going to lose about $1.7 million by games and by losing games and guaranteed games this season. They were supposed to play a couple of other Power 5 schools because those schools went conference only, so they lost $1.7 million in revenue to their athletic department, which can make or break their entire athletic department. Do you guys get what I'm saying here? I know that's a little confusing. We talked about this recently. So these smaller schools like Ball State, like Western Carolina, they get paid a lot of money by the Alabamas, by the NC States, by the Iowa States to play them. Okay, so Ball State comes up to Iowa State gives Ball State some money, and Iowa State gets to beat them and look good. That's why you call it a guaranteed game. That's why you call it a buy game. Because usually it's a really easy win, and it guarantees some money for Ball State. So with Ball State having a lot of different conferences with those games, like playing, for example, Iowa State, NC State, UNC, I'm just making that up, but those are all different conferences, right? Well, when a conference goes, we're only playing within our conference, well, that completely kicks Ball State out of it. And it really hurts the mid-major schools like Ball State. So Iowa State said, hey, let us do this. Let's make a separate independent contract where we'll pay you a guaranteed game and we can play you. And that will help us out because we don't have enough games on our schedule. So obviously Ball State is desperate to make a decision on their schedule and how to make some money out of their schedule because ultimately it doesn't become profitable for a small school to play the season with all the risk if they're not making any money. There's just no point in that. They don't have these television contracts like the SEC has or the Big Ten has or even the ACC has. They don't have these independent networks like the ACC network and the SEC network or the Big Ten network or whatever. They don't have that to supplement the revenue into their athletic department. So they really depend on these guarantee games. And Iowa State was the first one in the Big 12 to ink a buy game, to ink a guarantee game. Now, the reason that teams are going conference only is so that they can control the protocols around the coronavirus, right? And how often they're tested, what the protocols are going to be, and so on. That's the whole point of going conference only. It's all like-minded. They're all working on the same page, and they're all thinking the same way. Therefore, in theory, the games should be safer, and the players should be safer. And so therefore their game and their interaction, shouldn't be as risky, I would say. Still risky, but not as risky. It's hard to control that when you go outside of your conference. It's hard to control if NC State goes all the way down to Alabama. Instead, they can stay in that ACC conference region. That's why the teams are going conference only. And also, obviously, the regional effect of it. By, like I just said, by being conference only in theory. Obviously, there's outlier teams like Rutgers that has to travel to the Midwest 6 times or so to finish their schedule. But that's just one team of many. And also, Maryland isn't in that boat because for some reason they left the ACC and went to the Big Ten. So technically, they're not in Big Ten country. So, so they'll have to travel a bit. But for the most part, it works. It makes sense. You can't not do this because of a couple little outlier schools like Rutgers and Maryland. So I think the Big Ten is waiting for the individual schools to make their determination, for the schools to make a decision, which brings me to the biggest problem of all of this. Who the hell is in charge? And excuse my language, but if the Big 12 is waiting for the schools to make the decision, who's in charge? The NCAA supposedly, obviously it's an association, it's not an organization, it's an association, right? The association is made up of all the teams in the associations, and there's 130 of them. But 130 individual minds who have their own reasons for doing things, their own motivations for doing things, they want to do something for their own school. They're not thinking about other schools. Their own motivations for doing things can't dictate the NCAA to do anything. And so as a result, you have conferences forced to make their own decision. So you've had these conferences that are forced to make their own decision, and now in the Big 12, and this is why it's problematic, you're leaving it to individual organizations to make their decisions. And when you start getting that deep into those woods, and it starts to get all convoluted, aren't you in a sense like creating the problem that the conference-only schedule was made to prevent? And this is the lack of leadership or the lack of direction from the NCAA. And it's not their fault. Look, I'm not standing here saying, blame Mark Emmert. Point your fingers at Mark Emmert. We do that enough, and rightfully so. I'm not blaming the NCAA, but something that's been brought up many times over the year is how the NCAA has gotten, so focused on making money and being this economic engine for college sports that it actually lost its mandate. It's lost what they actually do. What do they do? No, seriously, what does the NCAA actually do? What are they doing other than help bring in money and pass down penalties for teams that cheat, right? What else do they do? I honestly do not know. And now it comes out when you have a pandemic, when you have a moment of crisis, and there's no direction, there's no guidance, and it's, hey, we're standing out of this. Good freaking luck. Good luck, SEC. Good luck, ACC. Good luck, Big 10, Pac-12, Big 12. Oh, and guess what? Now, ACC's got it down, SEC's got it down, Pac-12's got it down, Big 12's got it down, Big 10's got it down. Sorry, Big 12, you're screwed because you don't have enough teams in your conference. Now look, maybe that's what the conferences want. I don't know. Maybe they will, but I doubt it. I think they would like a high-level, conversation about how to do this the right way. This is a pandemic. Nobody knows how to do this the right way, but you can't just stand back and do nothing. The more heads that come to the situation, the more ideas. This is not leadership. And so as a result, the conferences have been the ones that have been leading the charge. And the ACC was the first, and everyone else had to follow suit by going conference-only schedule and trying to keep rivalries alive by doing the +1. The Big 12, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. I really don't know what they're doing unless they're doing what Iowa State is going to do. They're going to allow them to create their own schedule and obviously play a conference schedule, but then allow them to create other games. Allow them to throw in some bye games, some guarantee games, which isn't that dangerous given that the reason that everybody else is going conference only is so that they can control the protocols. It's risky. It's very risky for the Big 12, and maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they come up with something innovative, but they got to do something because the season, and I mean the season is almost here. The season is just supposed to start in 3.5 weeks, and everybody's pushed back. So that's not likely the case. That's not likely going to happen in 3.5 weeks. But what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for, Big 12? You got to make a decision sooner rather than later, because that decision is not going to be made for you by someone else. We have clearly learned that. And they look, and I hope they get this right. And I hope college football gets this right. And we focus obviously on the Power 5, the big schools that are going to, be a part of this big, new, shiny college playoff that we all love so much. But the more I see the uncertainty that this close to the college football season, I mean, summer training should have already started for a lot of these schools, right? So if they haven't, because they haven't for most of them, they didn't have any spring workouts. Obviously, maybe a couple Zoom meetings, stuff like that, but no spring workouts. Now no summer workouts. How in the world are you going to play a season? How does that happen? Which means you're pushing it back even further. And the more unequal, the more different that the starts of each conference start to happen, then the more unlikely it is to have a college football playoff. Because think about this, to have bowl games. I don't know how you're going to have any bowl games. This is just in the light of scheduling difficulties. So because one team might have 4 weeks off before their bowl games because they started earlier, or another team might only have 1 week off before their bowl games because they started later. I don't know if this gives you a disadvantage or an advantage, but it's inequitable. So one of these teams, one side or another, it's not going to work out right come bowl time or come college football playoff selection time. And without any of the cross games, without any of the conference versus other conference, the ACC versus SEC, the SEC versus Big Ten, the Big Ten versus Pac-12, the Pac-12 versus Big 12, without any of those, how do you determine the best teams? How do you determine the relative strength of these teams? You go by, it's a guessing game. You go by undefeated? Undefeated in the Pac-12 is what? Is that really that good? And then what happens if a couple, and then this is the one actually positive side of things, okay? If, and hopefully not, but if a season does happen, if a season happens, and I'm saying hopefully not to this part of the conversation, and teams get positive corona tests back, or a couple players get positive tests back, a couple teams get positive tests back, which again, hopefully not, whether you're going to have to be shut down for some amount of time, whether it's a week or 2 weeks. Fortunately, they only play a game a week. So if you missed a week, you could probably make that up by adjusting the schedule. Unlike what we're seeing in Major League Baseball, when you miss 7 games, if you miss a week, you're missing about 7-8 games, which is really hard, almost impossible to make up. But then also you have to look at it like this way. The season gets pushed back and truncated and just disjointed. And because of that, it's going to be really hard to put together bowl games, to put together a college football playoff selection and all of that stuff. Now, I'm sure we will know more. We'll have some more clarity as we get closer to the actual start of the season. At least I hope so. Because right now, there isn't much hope because there aren't any answers. And that's a problem. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hope you're having an amazing day today. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the Kayvon Division Tour goes on. AFC South, where you at? Let's lock in the predictions in just a second. Right back after this.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We are back. Welcome back, everybody. This is the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. You know who it is. Hope everyone's enjoying the show today. We're coming out of halftime. Had a good first half. I think we'd all agree we're probably in a pretty commanding lead, but it is the NFL. You never know. You never know what can happen from here, but definitely feel pretty positive about that first half. You know, we had a good second quarter there where we talked about a lot of interesting things with the college football. The ACC, they made a power move. I mean, there's really no other way to put it other than that. They made a big power move, and other conferences like the SEC had to follow suit because of that. There was really no other option for the SEC because of, like I said, those historic rivalry games that have been played for years and years on it. And look, it sucks that we're not going to see those games. Those games are something that, you know, we love, you know, the schools love, the fans love. It's something that really shows what college football is all about. The rivalry games. You know, that's what separates, that's the difference between college football and the NFL football. You know, you have good rivalries in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. You know, when I immediately think rivalries in the NFL, Baltimore, Pittsburgh comes to mind. Atlanta, New Orleans comes to mind. I actually would say that that's the best rivalry going on right now in the NFL. So you have those small little, you know, Seattle, San Francisco, that's a really good rivalry. But college football takes it to a whole nother level. That Georgia Tech game, that Florida State game, that's bragging rights for all year. That's bragging rights all year for those schools, you know? You're in state with the other fans. You're in the state with the same players and the same team and the same coaches. So it's intense. And we love nothing more than a good old Saturday where, you know, you see Clemson all in orange, and then here comes their rival South Carolina. We're not going to get that this year. You know, whether we get college football or not, it's not going to be fans. There's just no way around it. Maybe towards the middle or the end they'll be able to do, you know, social distance stadium, but I wouldn't count on it. But we can't be greedy. We have to accept what we get in a pandemic like this. If we're lucky to get sports, if we're lucky to get football, we have to be happy with that. Just like the NBA. The NBA started back up. You know, it's completely different than what we would think of the NBA, but they're making it work. And as fans, we have to accept that because we just want sports. It's that simple. Eventually, we'll get them back to normal. Eventually, we'll have these stadiums full again. Come on. I mean, this is sports. Like, sports are never going to die. We're just going through a tough period right now, and if you don't look at it positive, then there's really no other way to look at it. I mean, then it's just not going to work out in your best interest and my best interest, and anyone's best interest. You got to take it as it comes. And ACC said, you know what? This is a bad year, so we're making this move. I'm sorry, South Carolina. I'm sorry, Florida. We would love to play you guys every year, but we just can't this year. We have to do a 10-game schedule plus one in-state rival game, and that's it. That's how it's going to be. And I applaud the ACC for taking the first step. And now everyone has to follow. And then the question becomes now, what in the heck is the Big 12 going to do? They're really in a tough situation because they only have 10 teams in their conference. Are they all going to start to go that Iowa State route that I just laid out to you guys in the segment before? That's something that has to be seen. But it has to be seen pretty soon here because time is running out. We already know that the ACC and the SEC are starting on different days, which is a whole convoluted mess in itself. When's the Pac-12 going to start? When's the Big 10 going to start? When's the Big 12 going to start? We're talking Power 5 conferences here. The reason they're not on the same schedule is because we have no one pushing all of them together. We don't have the NCAA helping out whatsoever. Please, someone tweet at me and let me know what the heck the NCAA does, because I do not know. I really don't. And we went through all that anyways. All right, let's head into it. It's time for, you know what? The AFC South predictions. The Kayvon Division Tour lives on. We're heading down to Indianapolis. We're going to Jacksonville. We're going to Houston. And we're going to Tennessee. You guys thought I forgot there, didn't you? You like that pause? That was a pregnant pause right there. I wanted to give you guys a chance to think, man, he forgot that last team. And then, bop, it came out. All right, so you guys know how it's done, right? We do the predictions within the predictions to start off, as always. Just give you guys a little insight of how we look at this division through some of the biggest pieces that go to a team, whether that's the offense, the defense, the head coach, the QB, the wide receiver, whatever. And then we'll actually dive into the actual predictions within the division. So let's get it started right here. Best coach, it goes to Mike Vrabel. This one wasn't even very hard for me, to be honest with you. I do really like Frank Wright and what he's done, to an extent with the Indianapolis Colts. More of just the coach that he is. I think he's a really good offensive mind. There's no doubt about that to me. But Mike Vrabel showed us something last year as a coach that just makes him stand out over everybody else in the AFC South. He comes from that Patriot organization. He's a former player, and he has that mentality. He has that coach-player mentality, but then he's also a stern coach. Like, he makes sure that he holds his players accountable. He knows how he wants to play his football game, and he sticks to that. He doesn't go off to the side during the game and change the way things are. He sticks to his way of playing, and they're either going to win or lose based on that. And you kind of have to respect that, You really do, in my opinion. And that just shows the type of, to me, the type of coach that he is. He's a hard-nosed coach. I'm going to put the ball on the ground and I'm going to run it, and then we're going to play really good defense on the way. He's been a head coach for 2 years now, 9-7 both years, but last year they hit magic. Last year they hit big magic, and they made it all the way to the AFC Championship game. And they beat two of the best teams in the league on the way to do that. They beat the New England Patriots at home, and then they went and beat the best team in the league last year, Baltimore Ravens, at home again. Like in Baltimore, in New England, which is very, very impressive. So after that, I don't think you can go with anyone else. Mike Vrabel is the best coach in this division. The best QB in this one is obvious. It's hands down Deshaun Watson. Nobody is even in Deshaun Watson's class when you come to this division. That's right, not even Phillip Rivers. I mean, not a chance. This is Deshaun Watson's division, He has won it the last 2 years, and he will continue to keep dominating this division, even while his own team tries to sabotage that, which is what they did this offseason by trading away his best target, which is completely nonsense to me. And I will still never be able to wrap my head around that. But Deshaun Watson has showed us that he can do it with talent, without talent. He can put the team on his back. He can do it on the ground. He can do it through the air. He can do it behind a terrible offensive line, which is what he had his entire career so far. And now he's going into his 4th season. He's going to get a big old contract extension like he deserves. And he is going to be one of those young QBs of the future that is going to be a star in the face of the NFL, along with the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. See, because of Lamar Jackson's year and because of Patrick Mahomes winning the Super Bowl, we always talk about those two, and we forget to add Deshaun Watson in that mix. We forget that Deshaun Watson beat Patrick Mahomes in the regular season last year. We forget that Deshaun Watson was up 24-0 on Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs this year before they allowed them to come back. Deshaun Watson is definitely in that class of those top 2 quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, and he's right there behind them. And I would actually put him ahead of Lamar Jackson. Deshaun Watson is a star quarterback, and he's the best quarterback in this division. Best wide receiver. This one is an interesting one because obviously the best wide receiver just got shipped off to Arizona in DeAndre Hopkins. So now you kind of have to step back and say, well, then who is the best wide receiver? And there's a lot of different answers and different ways you could go here. I don't think there's one stud receiver that sticks out in this division. There are a lot of good receivers. There's just not that great one. I was thinking about, you have T.Y. Hilton with the Colts, who has been a really good receiver, Pro Bowl receiver for a long time, but he has a lot of injury history, and he's kind of been on the decline lately. You have A.J. Brown, who was an awesome rookie last year, and if it wasn't for Kyler Murray, I think he would have won Rookie of the Year. You have Brandon Cooks, who came over this offseason from the Rams to the Texans, who's always been a pretty good receiver, but been on the come down a little bit as well the last couple years. And then you have this guy, who I'm actually going to give the crown to for best wide receiver in the division. And this is going to be odd. People probably are going to not like this, but it's Will Fuller to me. I think Will Fuller is the best wide receiver in this division. And remember, we're doing this based off this season, this upcoming season. And Will Fuller's going to wear the crown this season. DeAndre Hopkins is gone. Will Fuller's going to get a lot more targets. Now, the one question is, can he stay healthy? I totally get that, and that's something I'm a little worried about as well. But if he can stay healthy, this man can do it all. He is a speedster, one of the fastest in the league, but he also can catch those over-the-middle type routes as well. Will Fuller wears the crown for best receiver. Best running back, Derrick Henry, not even close. Derrick Henry is a man playing against boys when he starts to run, especially when he starts to run downhill. He is a monster. He cannot be taken down, and he just keeps getting better each and every year. So happy for him for getting a contract extension. Derrick Henry is the king, and he is going to wear that crown for many years to come. Best tight end, this is an awful division for tight end. Let's just put it out there. So really, Eric Ebron was the best tight end in this division. He went off to the Steelers, so I'm going to have to go with the other Colts tight end, which is Jack Doyle. Really wasn't much to pick there, but Jack Doyle has been a consistent tight end for numerous years now. So Jack Doyle is the best tight end in the AFC South. The best offense goes to the Texans. Even though DeAndre Hopkins left, they still have now Brandon Cooks. They still have Kenny Stills. They still have Will Fuller. They still have Duke Johnson. They still have David Johnson. And they still have Deshaun Watson. That is the best offense in the league. In the AFC South. And the best defense goes to the Tennessee Titans. The Titans, that is a hard-nosed defense coached by a really good coach. The Titans are the best defense in the AFC South. Now, let's get into the team-by-team breakdown here. You ready? Let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Head coach Doug Marrone, 2019 record 6-10. Pressure-packed year. This is a pressure-packed year for Doug Marrone and general manager David Caldwell. They could be out the doors as the Jags look to reboot if they don't have a good season this year. And I honestly think that it looks like it's going to end up that way. The Jaguars are a very odd organization. I mean, to be frank, they kind of have been an irrelevant organization their entire existence. They really haven't ever won anything of importance. This is the weird part about them, and especially as of recently, they have done a fantastic job drafting players, which is so weird because usually that correlates to being a good organization. But again, it just shows there's so much more into putting a good organization than drafting players. And they really have done a good job. I mean, they've drafted guys like Jalen Ramsey, Dante Fowler, Yannick Ngakoue, Leonard Fournette, DJ Chark out of LSU. Like, these guys are really good players. I mean, they know how to draft, but this is the problem. They piss every single one of their players off somehow. I don't know how they do it. I don't understand why they do it or what they're doing, but half of the names I just read you are gone because they want it out. And Yannick Ngakoue wants out. He wants out so bad, guys, that the Jaguars offered him a massive contract extension, bigger than any other team's going to offer him. And he passed up on it because he wants out of this organization so bad. Like, what could you have possibly done to this player to make him want to leave that bad? What could you have possibly done to Jalen Ramsey to make him want to leave that bad? It's mind-blowing to me. I don't get it at all, but their organization has a problem. They're not able to create proper relationships with their players, and that is something that is a massive flaw when it comes to building a good team. So, let's go back and look what happened last year. They signed Nick Foles to a 4-year, $80 million contract. First game of the season, Nick Foles breaks his collarbone. In comes rookie 6th-round pick out of Washington State, Gardner Minshew. The Minshew man, the mustache man. And he shows some promise, no doubt. He shows that he can sling the ball. He shows that he definitely has an arm, that he definitely can play quarterback in the NFL. So the Jaguars decide 1 year after signing Foles to an $80 million deal that they're going to trade him to the Bears for a 5th-round pick, which is just so dumb that they even signed him. And I said that from the beginning last offseason. Now they're playing this season out to see what they have in Minshew. Look, they could have easily signed Cam Newton or Jameis Winston or Teddy Bridgewater, but they didn't want to. Because I think that they're doing two things. They're doing this. They're going to watch and see how Gardner Minshew is. And if the season goes bad, then guess what? They're going to be in the running for a Trevor Lawrence and get their guy. That's the big deal. That's what I think the whole point of their decisions are these off seasons. And, I think that's what they end up happening. I think that's what ends up happening. Look, they won 6 games last year, but they traded away A.J. Boye. They traded away Calais Campbell. So their defense is going to be much worse. They traded away Jalen Ramsey as well, but that was midseason. They have some good young pieces on offense, which will be good moving forward as long as they can keep them happy and not piss them off as well. I think that the Jaguars will be the worst team in the NFL next year. Vegas has the Jaguars as a win total of 4.5, and I am locking that under in right now. If you live close to a bank, you better run over there, grab your checkbook, grab your wallet, write it down, hammer it in, grab some nails, start swinging, because this is a lockdown under 4.5. No debate about it. Worst team in the league this year, Jacksonville Jaguars. We got the Indianapolis Colts now. Head coach Frank Wright, 2019 record 7-9. The Colts are an interesting team to me. I like their head coach, like I said, and Frank Wright. I think he's a really smart offensive mind, and he has experience with Phillip Rivers, which will be great. They have a really good one of the best GMs in the league in Chris Ballard, who does a fantastic job drafting. So the Colts they've been through a lot, though. It feels like it was 3 years ago where Andrew Luck announced that he was retiring, even though that was just last offseason. Crazy to think about. So they brought in Jacoby Brissett. He ended up starting. And remember, he actually had them in a good position last year. They started out 5-2. They were on top of the AFC South. And then for some reason, things kind of spiraled out of control there. Ended up the season 7-9. So this offseason, the Colts decided to make a couple big splashes in free agency. First, they signed Phillip Rivers, longtime Pro Bowl quarterback Phillip Rivers, away from the Chargers, which is an interesting dynamic. I think a lot of people believe that Rivers is washed up. And that will be interesting to see what happens here. They also traded a first-round pick to the 49ers for defensive tackle DeForest Buckner and then signed him to a big deal, which I really like that. They needed help on their defensive line, and they pretty much looked at the draft and said, yeah, we're not going to get anyone of the talent of DeForest Buckner, so let's go ahead and give our first-round pick away and just bring him in, someone that's already proven in this league. I respect that move for sure. There's no doubt about that. So all in all, it just comes down to one thing. The success of Phillip Rivers. Look, he's going to be playing against the best offensive line he's ever played in his entire career. The Colts offensive line is phenomenal. It is so good. And he'll be playing against that, and that will give him time to maneuver around in the pocket, to take his time, and to find the open target. Okay? He'll have a Nyheim Hines to drop the ball off to. He'll have Marlon Mack. He'll have rookie running back Jonathan Taylor, who I loved in Wisconsin. He's going to have T.Y. Hilton. He's going to have Michael Pittman, rookie coming out of USC, who I also really liked in college. He has targets. There are no doubt about that. He has Jack Doyle, who I said was the best tight end in this division. It all comes down to this. Are we going to see 2018 Phillip Rivers, who led the Chargers to 12-4, or are we going to see 2019 Phillip Rivers, who threw the most interceptions in the league? Whichever one we see, that's how this season's going to go. If we see 2018 Phillip Rivers, the Colts are going to be fighting for the division and for a good playoff spot. If we see 2019, the Colts are not going to have a good season. My prediction, Vegas has the Colts win total at 9. I think they are spot on. I see a 9-win team here, which in the new NFL playoff format, that could get them in. That could get them into the wild card spot, possibly. So it's 9 wins for the Colts. Lock it in. That is my pick. Now, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to finish up the Tennessee Titans. We're going to finish up the Houston Texans. And then we're going to dive into the teams that are ready to go, that are most prepared to handle this offseason going straight into the NFL season. Who's able to go right into week 1 and feel fully confident that their team is ready to go even though they didn't have an offseason? We read you guys the names of the teams that are going to really hurt based off of this COVID-19 offseason. So now we're going to flip it around. We're going to tell you the teams that are ready to win right off the bat. And you're going to want to stick tuned because you're going to want to see if your team is in that category. We'll be right back, coming back to end the show, fourth quarter, right after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast, and we are heading into quarter number 4. Throw up the 4 fingers. We're heading into quarter number 4, ending up the show. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show so far. It's been a good one, and now we're going to end the game the best way possible. We're going to finish up the Tennessee Titans, the Houston Texans. We're going to make our predictions, and then we're going to give you guys the teams most equipped, most ready to go come week 1 after this COVID-19 offseason that we've had. Now, little recap. We just said Jacksonville Jaguars, we think they're the worst team in the NFL this league. Vegas has them at 4.5 wins. I'm hammering the under on that. I think that they win 4 or 3 games. And I think that they're going to be in line to get Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson, which I think is their plan all along. Then we went through the Colts. The Colts, it's all about Phillip Rivers. Is Phillip Rivers ever able to perform the way he did in 2018 or the way he did in 2019? That's the question. That's the big question right there. If he is, they're going to be fighting for the division title. They're going to be fighting for a playoff spot. Vegas has them at 9 wins. I think that they're spot on with that. I think that Vegas is spot on with the 9 wins. And I think that's exactly what it's going to be around. So I'm taking even on that. Not betting over, not betting under. Now, for the Tennessee Titans, let's dive into it. We've got head coach Mike Vrabel, 2019 record 9-7. The Titans had one of the craziest years last year in recent memory. I mean, I really don't remember a team ever having a year like they had. I mean, think about it. They started the year with Marcus Mariota, who I actually really liked coming out of Oregon. And, I admit when I'm wrong. I thought he was going to be a franchise star. And he just hasn't lived up to that. Look, he's shown great flashes. He really has. I mean, he's taken the Titans 9-7 a couple years, but he just hasn't been able to win the big games and stay consistent enough. So they started with Marcus Mariota as their quarterback. They went 2-4 before deciding to make a change, bring in Ryan Tannehill, which turned out to be such a smart offseason signing by them. They bring in Tannehill, and the rest is history. They go 7-3 down the stretch. Tannehill catches fire. Derrick Henry catches fire. At one point, Henry had, during a 4-game stand, listen to this, during a 4-game win streak, he had 188 yards rushing, 159 yards rushing, 149 yards rushing, and 103 yards rushing, all in a 4-game span. That's remarkable. Back to back to back to back. It's wild the season that Derrick Henry had. They squeaked into the playoffs by winning the last game of the season against Houston, and the rest is history. Mike Vrabel, former player for Bill Belichick, marched his team into New England, beat the Patriots in the playoffs. That literally sent Tom Brady packing to Tampa Bay. Then they go and they beat the best regular season team in the Ravens at Baltimore. And then they go to Kansas City where they have a 10-point lead, but then eventually the luck runs out and Mahomes just goes nuts. But this was a special season for the Titans. It really was. And they have a lot of great pieces in play. It's definitely a franchise that's looking up. They've got A.J. Brown, young receiver. They've got Derrick Henry. They have a great defense. They added Vic Beasley, who I think will be a great fit in Vrabel's coaching system. On paper, they're stacked. The only problem is this. I don't know if I can trust Tannehill. I don't know if he can put together another season like he just did. And they have no backup now. See, Tannehill was in an interesting position last year. He was playing for his career, really. He was in Miami. They let him go. He goes to Tennessee. And it looked like, okay, maybe he might not be a starting quarterback again. So when he got his chance, he grabbed that and took full advantage of it. And then he goes and gets a huge contract extension now. Is he still going to have that fire? Is he still going to have that tenacity, that energy, that motivation to say, I'm going to prove these people wrong like he did last year? That's what worries me. Tannehill worries me. That is the only question that I have, and it's a big question because it's the quarterback position, which is the most important position in the NFL. One other thing, Tannehill has had injury history in the past. If Tannehill goes down, what happens? That season is over. They don't have a backup. They didn't sign a backup for some reason. That's going to be a problem. All in all, good roster, good defense, good offense, good head coach, and a good quarterback, but a lot of questions with that quarterback. Vegas has the Titans win total at 8.5, so they clearly think that the Titans will be taking a step back. And I'm going over on this. I think they're a 9-7 team, just like the Colts. They could impress me and get that 10th win, but I'm hammering the over 8.5 on this. I think that they end 9-7, just like the Colts do. It's going to be one of those close division races. So hammering the over of 8.5, 9 wins for the Titans. Now, let's go to the Houston Texans here. Billy O'Brien, 2019 record 10-6. Awful offseason for the Texans. I think that this isn't even an argument. The Texans had the worst offseason out of any other team in the league. By far. You can't say the Patriots because they ended up signing Cam Newton. And even if they didn't sign Cam Newton, I still think the Texans would have the worst offseason. And it's really not that bad. Like, they really did bring in some good pieces. It's just so uncalled for to trade away a superstar receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. If my Falcons did that to Julio Jones, I really don't know what I would think. I mean, I would be so upset because you just don't do that to a player like DeAndre Hopkins. So that's an issue. But all of that, since trading up to draft quarterback Deshaun Watson in the first round of the 2017 NFL draft, the Texans have been treading water trying to really recapture their draft capital and build a well-rounded team around him, around the signal caller. That's been the problem, okay? That's been the big issue here. They haven't been able to put pieces around Deshaun Watson, especially on that offensive line to protect him. Watson has been getting hit every season. He's always running for his life, and he still manages to win that division, this AFC South division, 2 years in a row, which is just remarkable in itself. So yeah, they traded away DeAndre Hopkins, but they added David Johnson. They added cornerback Bradley Roby, who I really like. They added wide receiver Randall Cobb. They re-signed their kicker, which I can't say his name, and I'm sorry about that. They re-signed tight end Darren Fells. So they have pieces here, and then they have running backs. They have David Johnson, who had a really bad year with the Cardinals, but he's looking to bounce back. I think he'll bounce back. I don't think he'll be that David Johnson that we saw earlier in his career, but I don't think he'll be as bad as he was last year. They have Duke Johnson Jr., who's one of the best pass-catching running backs we have in the league. And then they have, Will Fuller. They have Brandon Cooks. They have Kenny Stills. They have Randall Cobb. They have a good receiving core. There's no doubt about that. But just like I said about Phillip Rivers, and really just like I said about Ryan Tannehill, this also comes down to Deshaun Watson. But the one difference between Deshaun Watson and Phillip Rivers and Ryan Tannehill is I know Deshaun Watson's going to show up. I know Deshaun Watson is going to put this team on his back and do everything he can to get this team in the playoffs. That's how good he is. That's what he's done since he's been in the league, and that's what he's going to continue to do for now. Now, in the future, in the very near future, if this team does not start to protect him, they're going to have issues. They're going to get him hurt. And that is something that they have to fix ASAP, and they're trying to. They traded for Laramie Tunsil, who's a really good left tackle that came over from Miami last season. So because of Deshaun Watson, because he's the best quarterback in the division, because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league already at this age, Vegas has Houston extremely low. They have the Texans win total at 7.5. The Texans won 10 games last year. So they think that they're almost 3 games worse this year. There is no way that as long as Watson is under center, that this team does not win more than 7 games. Watson is too freaking good. I have all the faith in the world in him. So this is one of these picks where I'm not putting my shoes on. I'm not putting my shirt on. I am sprinting to the bank. I am grabbing my nail. I am grabbing my hammer. And I am hammer lock of the year. Texans over 7.5. There is no doubt about it. Deshaun Watson is too good. He will put this team on his back. Lock that baby in. Close the eyes and don't think about it again because you will win some money on that. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon. Want to thank everyone for listening to the show today as we come down the fourth quarter to end the game. Big lead on our hands here. No one's catching us. Facts are too stern. Content is too good. So, now I want to dive into the fun segment, the final segment, the segment we always love to do to end the show. And this time we're talking about the teams that are most equipped to handle a COVID-19 offseason. See, we went through a couple shows ago talking about the teams that are going to be most affected by a COVID-19 offseason like this, which technically means there was no offseason. And we went through those. We went through the New York Giants with a young quarterback and a new coach in Joe Judge. The Cincinnati Bengals with a rookie quarterback and a young coach in Zach Taylor. The Miami Dolphins with a rookie quarterback and a younger coach as well for the Miami Dolphins and Brian Flores. So we went through all these teams, the teams with the new coaches, the teams with the new quarterbacks, or the teams that just don't have a good, stable organization like the Jacksonville Jaguars. That it's not just about that you have a new coach or a new quarterback. You have to have you can have a veteran quarterback and a veteran head coach. If you don't have a stable organization, you are in for a long year because you have to be able to adapt. Adaptability is the key to this season, and you guys will hear me use that word over and over and over as the season goes on. Now, there are so many factors that are going to go into these choices that I make for these teams. Not a lot of change in recent years, like for what's going to go into this decision of teams that I'm picking that I think will be equipped to handle an offseason like this and come right off the bat, go right into the season ready to go on a high note. It's going to be, like I said, stable organizations, not a lot of change. And, of course, adaptability. This is what every team should write on their walls in their locker room this season. Adaptability. Because one week, things might look normal, and the next week, the entire situation might be upside down. Who can adapt and change if that happens? Well, let's finish off the game and get into it, baby. My first team I'm going to take is the Denver Broncos. Now, you guys might say this is a confusing pick, right? Because you're going against some of the criteria you used for the teams that are not very equipped. I get it. Drew Lock, young quarterback, going into his second year, didn't get an offseason. That is tough. But I'm looking at Denver Broncos in a different situation here. The reason I'm taking the Denver Broncos is because if you look at a COVID-19 map right now, if you look at a map and you look at the hot spots all around, some of the very hot spots NFL regions, the state of Florida with 3 teams is on fire. The state of Texas with 2 teams is on fire. Southern California with 2 teams is on fire, and so on. Vegas is on fire with the Raiders there. And look, I'm not just picking on these teams. This is happening everywhere. But the point I was going to make is that if you look at a map of COVID cases in the United States, there are very, very few cases in Colorado. Colorado has done a fantastic job against COVID. Obviously, I'm not an epidemiologist or anything like that, but that's one of the few places in the country that you can travel in and out of without having to worry about quarantining yourself when you leave there. So I just say that I think there's an advantage to playing for the Denver Broncos and knowing that you're not going out into the world and you don't have to worry about so much different things like getting gas or stopping at a restaurant to pick up food on their way home. These things are where other teams that are in hotspot locations have to really worry about doing. Can't do it at all, to be honest. Colorado has done a really good job with the virus, and I think that's important. So to me, the fact that the Broncos have totally remade their offense with Drew Lock. Now, we don't know if he's really that good yet. We still need to figure that out. But they put some really explosive pieces around him on offense, especially through the draft this year and through free agency. I like what the Broncos are doing. They've always been a stable organization. John Elway will make sure that this team is following the rules. John Elway will make sure that he talks with his team. He communicates with his team, and just that the place they are in the country right now, which matters so much, I'm taking the Denver Broncos as a team that might be ready to come right into the season and get ready to go. My next pick is the New England Patriots. Now, again, this is confusing as well because I'm going against some of my models, some of my cues to why I picked teams that are not very equipped. The Patriots have a new quarterback. They didn't get an offseason together. I really don't even know if Cam Newton has had the chance to talk to Josh McDaniels. And that is crazy to think about. So yes, you could say I'm contradicting myself here, but the Patriots to me are an outlier. And this is why. The more uncertainty and the more chaos, the more upside down twists and turns equals the more faith in Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots to me. Even with 6 guys opting out, even with more possibly joining them, it's the ultimate do your job, next man up philosophy, or get the hell out. There's no excuses. They are also in place in Massachusetts where the bars and restaurants for indoor seating aren't open and likely won't be open, and that's a big deal. So that reduces the temptation for some players. Bill Belichick, to me, will do a great job of making the players accountable, making the team leaders make the young players accountable. He'll weed out the guys that he thinks could maybe create the risk of bringing the virus into the facility. They will not screw around under Bill Belichick. They have a plan for everything, and their plan will have plans. And their plans will have plans, and so on. And those plans will all be buttoned up, and they will, unlike any other team, I think, find a way to thrive through these rules. And you know what? Look, we always know someone's going to do this year. And that's finding a way to use the injured reserve to stash players because you can put players on injured reserve and have them there for 3 weeks. For only 3 weeks. Usually when you put them on injured reserve, they have to be there for half the season, for 8 weeks. Now it's only for 3 weeks. So whatever the rules are, we know one guy is going to figure out how to immediately use them to his advantage and push the limits. And that guy's Bill Belichick. That's why I feel like the Patriots are going to be fine, if not better than they would have been in a normal year. My next pick, Kansas City. And mainly because they have a bigger margin of error than almost every team in the league. And you say, Kayvon, what does that mean? And look, I get it. They've lost Lauren Duvernay. They've lost Damian Williams, their 100-yard rusher from the Super Bowl, who had 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to clinch the game. That's a big loss when you hear it on paper, right? But then you realize they brought in rookie Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU. Then you realize they have every single coach from last year's coaching staff, and that is a massive luxury and something that we barely ever see from a team that just won the Super Bowl. They also showed us last year that they are equipped to handle things if Patrick Mahomes misses a couple games. Remember, he had that knee injury. In came backup Matt Moore, who's just been a journeyman. But he was able to thrive in this Kansas City offense. They were able to go 2-1 and stay afloat during that time. They are knee-deep in talent on both sides of the ball. Andy Reid is a terrific coach and will take COVID-19 serious, and that's a huge part of this, guys and girls. These coaches have to be willing to hold their players accountable. They have to be willing to punish their players if one is caught in a COVID risk situation, and Andy Reid will do that. My next team, Pittsburgh Steelers. I've got to go with Mike Tomlin here. To me, Mike Tomlin does not get enough credit for his ability to hold a team together that easily could implode at any given minute. He somehow kept, and this is crazy, he somehow kept Antonio Brown pointed in the right direction for a decade. As we have learned over the last 18 months, that is almost an impossible task in and of itself. That no one else is capable of even attempting to try at this point. I mean, think about that, guys. This guy had Antonio Brown on his team for a decade. And we never heard any type of noise until the very end. That's remarkable. You now throw in what happened last year with Big Ben gone week 2 of the season. Mike Tomlin takes his guys. He coaches them. He coaches them up. No excuses. He's going to keep that virus out of the facility. He's going to hold his players accountable. He's going to make sure you guys go home and stay home, and whatever adversity comes their way, he's proven that he can not just deal with it, but he can thrive in it. He has a good team and mainly a young team, to which is another reason everyone will listen. And as I said in my division tour last episode, I like the Steelers a lot on the field this year. And Mike Tomlin is a big reason for that, just like he is for keep making sure this team is equipped and ready to go week 1 after this type of offseason. All right, and then my last team here is the Atlanta Falcons. And I get it. Whenever I say good things about the Falcons, you guys all want to jump on, oh, he's biased, blah, blah, blah. Hear me out here. First of all, I want to start with this. The Falcons owner, Arthur Blank, has shown numerous times that he is willing to spend money. And you say, Kayvon, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it's going to be really important how these organizations, how these facilities are laid out. Will there be a cleaning staff that comes in every single night? Will they be willing to change the locker room to social distance the players? They have to spend money on this stuff. The Falcons owner has already spent that money. See, the training camp and practice center where the Falcons practice at, they have townhomes there, on campus there, where each person can have their own townhome to stay in, to sleep in. So they'll be separated from everyone else. Arthur Blank has already spaced out the locker room. He already has cleaning staffs in there cleaning everything. Look, I know this sounds silly, but these things matter. They really do. And then on top of all of that, the Falcons have a head coach in Dan Quinn who is a player's coach. The players listen to him. The players trust him. They have a veteran quarterback in Matt Ryan who understands the importance to all of this stuff. I think the Falcons are set up to handle this type of chaotic offseason, and I think that they should start off the bat pretty well because of all of that. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I want to thank everyone out there for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. That right there were my teams that were equipped and ready to go. Of course, there's some other teams out there, but those are the teams that I mainly wanted to highlight in this. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. We had a great game so far. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, all done. And that means the game and the show is over. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review. That really helps. We've got a couple great ones lately. We appreciate that to everyone that has written one. And if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you and have a great night. We'll see you back here in a couple of days.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.